Hi, guys. Tonight, we begin a journey into a world that exists in the soft, muffled shadows of a gaslit bedroom. We're going back to a time when the morning wasn't just a start to the day, but a deliberate, almost sacred reconstruction of the self. We are traveling back to the year 1885. To a cold, quiet morning in a grand townhouse, where the air is heavy with the scent of coal dust, and the silent expectation of a society that never truly slept. Before we step into the dim light of this Victorian morning, I would love it if you just take a moment to subscribe to this channel and give this video a like. Only if you feel this atmosphere is right for you. It really helps these long-form stories find their way to those who are seeking a bit of stillness in a noisy world. And I'm always curious. Where are you right now as you listen to my voice? Are you resting in the quiet of your bedroom, or perhaps looking out at the city lights from a high-rise window? What time is it for you? Drop a comment and let me know. I read every single one, and they remind me that we are all connected in these quiet moments. Now, settle in. Let the weight of your blankets ground you. Take a deep breath. Let's talk about the first breath of 1885. Imagine the silence of a house at 5:30 a.m. The city of Boston is still under a blanket of blue-gray mist. Outside, the only sound is the rhythmic, distant clip-clop of a lone horse-drawn carriage on the cobblestones, a sound that echoes and then fades into the fog. Inside, the house is cold. The fireplaces have burned down to gray ash and glowing embers, and the air carries that sharp, metallic tang of coal smoke that defined the era. In the master bedroom, our journey begins with a woman named Eleanor. She is lying still, watching the first pale rays of sun struggle through the heavy, lace-trimmed velvet drapes. She is in that liminal space between dreams and duty. For Eleanor, and for millions of women like her, getting out of bed is not a simple act. It is the beginning of a transformation. On the chair beside her bed, her clothes are waiting. But they aren't just clothes. They are the components of a social identity, a physical architecture that will define every breath she takes for the next 16 hours. Before she even touches the floor, there is the ritual of the light. A small match is struck, the sulphurous smell momentarily filling the room. The gas lamp flickers, sighs, and then settles into a soft, amber glow. In this light, the room looks like a painting. The mahogany furniture, the silver brushes on the vanity, the porcelain wash basin, they all seem to wait in a state of suspended animation. Eleanor sits up. The floorboards groan slightly under her weight, a familiar, friendly sound in a house that has seen generations of mornings. She reaches for the first layer. The chemise. Think about the texture of this fabric, fine, white linen, soft from years of washing, cool against the skin. It is the only thing that will be truly hers today, the only layer that touches her skin directly, shielded from the world by everything that comes after. As she pulls the chemise over her head, the fabric makes a soft, rushing sound, like a secret whispered in the dark. This is the base. The foundation. It is simple, unadorned, and honest. But the honesty of the morning is about to be layered over. Soon, the door will open. The maid will enter with a tray of warm water, and the heavy, bone-lined corset will be brought out of the wardrobe. But for these few minutes, Eleanor is just Eleanor. Not a wife, not a socialite, not a symbol of Victorian morality. Just a human being breathing the cold morning air. Notice the silence again. It's a heavy silence, thick with the history of 1,000 such mornings. The ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece is slow, steady, deliberate. In 1885, time didn't feel like it was running away from you. It felt like something you lived inside of. We watch as she pours the lukewarm water into the basin. The splash of the water breaks the stillness. It's a rhythmic sound, splash, ripple, silence. She washes her face, the cold water shocking her senses, pulling her fully into the reality of the Gilded Age. Every movement is slow, because the room is cold, and because the day ahead requires so much energy. She looks at her reflection in the darkened mirror. Behind her, the shadows of the bedposts look like tall, silent sentinels. She is preparing for the velvet cage. She is preparing to be molded, laced, and structured. But here, in this first breath of dawn, there is peace. A quiet before the storm of social obligations. A moment of stillness before the steel and the whalebone take control. As we sit here with Eleanor, in the dim, golden light of a vanished century, we realize that history isn't just about the big events. It's about these small, quiet rituals. It's about the weight of the linen, the flicker of the lamp, and the way the morning air feels on a Tuesday in January, over 100 years ago. Listen to the house waking up. The distant rattle of a coal scuttle downstairs. The faint muffled voice of a servant in the hallway. The world is calling. And the ritual of the morning, the construction of the Victorian woman, is about to truly begin. Stay with me. Let the atmosphere of this room settle over you. We are in no rush. The year 1885 has all the time in the world, and so do we. The sun has climbed just a fraction higher now, casting long, slanted rectangles of pale gold across the floral carpet, but the room still clings to its morning chill. Eleanor stands by the window, her silhouette framed by the heavy lace, as the door creaks open with a familiar, high-pitched protest. It is time. The maid enters, moving like a shadow, her footsteps muffled by the thick rugs. In her hands, she carries the object that will define the next 16 hours of Eleanor's life. The corset. It rests on the maid's arms like a piece of dormant machinery, a complex skeleton of white coutil fabric, reinforced with dozens of vertical strips of polished whalebone, or perhaps the new, flexible watch spring steel. Take a moment to imagine the weight of it. It is heavy, surprisingly stiff, and cool to the touch. It represents the very architecture of Victorian womanhood, a structural necessity that promised grace, but demanded a silent, internal sacrifice. Eleanor takes a deep breath, perhaps the last full, deep breath she will be allowed until the moon is high in the sky. She stands with her arms slightly raised, a posture of surrender to the fashion of the age. The maid wraps the stiff fabric around Eleanor's torso, and the first click of the front busk echoes in the quiet room. Click, click, click. The metal fasteners slide into place, locking her into a shape that nature never intended. Now, we move to the back. The long, white silk laces hang down like the strings of a harp, waiting to be played. The maid takes a firm grip on the cords. Listen to the sound of the laces sliding through the metal eyelets. It's a rhythmic, sliding hiss. Shh, shh, shh. With every pull, the world around Eleanor seems to tighten. The fabric presses against her ribs, the whalebone guides her spine into a rigid, unyielding line, and the soft curves of the morning are disciplined into the sharp, disciplined angles of the day. It is a strange sensation, being reconstructed from the outside in. As the laces tighten, Eleanor's posture shifts. Her shoulders are forced back, Her chest is lifted, and her waist begins to narrow. It is not painful, not yet, but it is a constant, firm embrace that never lets go. It is the physical manifestation of a society that valued order above comfort, and form above freedom. Think about the engineering behind this garment. Every bone was placed with mathematical precision, designed to support the weight of the massive skirts that will follow, and to provide a canvas for the elaborate gowns of the Gilded Age. But there is a hidden cost to this architecture. Beneath the silk and the bone, the lungs must adapt. The breath becomes shallower, moving from the deep belly to the upper chest. The heart beats against a wall of fabric. Eleanor catches her reflection again. She is no longer the soft, breathing woman who woke up in the dim light of dawn. She is becoming an icon. An hourglass of flesh and steel. The maid continues her work, her movements practiced and unsentimental. She pulls the laces tighter, checking the alignment, ensuring that the center of the corset aligns perfectly with the center of Eleanor's spirit. Outside, the city is waking up. The distant rattle of milk bottles, the shout of a street vendor, the world is moving fast. But here, in this room, time is measured by the tension of a silk cord. There is a peculiar silence that comes with the corset. It's a stillness of the body. You cannot slouch, you cannot collapse, you cannot hide. You are held. Upright. Unwavering. Eleanor feels the pressure against her lower ribs, a reminder that her body is no longer entirely her own. It belongs to the drawing room, to the opera house, to the eyes of 1,000 strangers who will judge her by the perfection of her silhouette. We linger on this moment. The feeling of being laced. The way the fabric warms against the skin. The way the world seems to shrink as the corset closes. It is a ritual of containment. A velvet cage that offers both protection and imprisonment. The maid ties the final knot, a firm, double bow at the small of the back. The excess laces are tucked away, hidden from sight, just like the effort it took to create this form. Eleanor takes a shallow, experimental breath. It hits the wall of the corset and stops. She is ready. The architecture is complete. The house hums around her. The fire in the grate pops, a single spark flying onto the hearth and fading into a gray speck of ash. The morning is progressing, and the foundation has been laid. Stay here for a while, in the quiet tension of this room. Feel the weight of the history that Eleanor is wearing. The steel, the bone, the silk, and the silent, rhythmic pulse of a woman waiting for her day to begin. The corset is now closed, the front busks are fastened, but the true ritual, the most intimate and demanding part of the morning, has only just begun. Eleanor stands perfectly still, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the mahogany vanity, as the maid moves behind her to begin the symphony of the laces. In the silence of the room, the sound of the long, flat, silk cords is almost hypnotic. They are pulled through the rows of metal eyelets with a rhythmic, sliding hiss. It is a sound that has echoed through bedrooms for centuries, a sound that signals the final transition from the private self to the public figure. Think about the physical reality of these laces. They are not mere strings. They are the tension lines of a woman's social standing. As the maid begins to pull, starting from the top and the bottom, moving slowly toward the waist, Eleanor feels the first true wave of constriction. It is a firm, steady pressure, like a pair of giant hands wrapping around her ribs, slowly, deliberately, squeezing the air out of the lower lungs. Eleanor fixes her gaze on a single point on the wall, a small, faded rose on the wallpaper. She focuses on it, using it as an anchor as her body is reshaped. With every tug of the laces, the room seems to grow slightly quieter. The sound of her own heartbeat becomes louder in her ears, a dull, rhythmic thud against the stiffened fabric. The maid is strong, her hands calloused and practiced. She knows exactly how much tension is required, exactly where the limit lies between a fashionable silhouette and a fainting spell. Listen to the tension in the air. The silk cords are stretched tight now, vibrating like the strings of a cello. If you were to pluck one, it would surely ring out with a sharp, clear note. This is the architecture of discipline. To be a lady in 1885 was to be a masterpiece of restraint. Every inch that is taken from the waist is added to the perceived virtue of the wearer. Eleanor's breath is shallow now, a soft, fluttering rhythm in the upper part of her chest. She can feel the cold metal of the eyelets through the thin linen of her chemise, pressing into her back, marking her skin with small, circular indentations. It is a strange kind of intimacy, this bond between the woman and her maid, connected by a cord of silk, working together to create a lie that the world calls beauty. The maid pauses for a moment, bracing her foot against the base of the bed frame for better leverage. This is the final pull. Eleanor grips the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. The laces hiss one last time, a long, sustained sound that seems to vibrate through her entire skeleton. Her waist is drawn in, her spine is locked in a perfect, unyielding curve, and for a second, the world tilts. But then, she adjusts. The body is remarkably resilient. It finds the small pockets of space that remain. It learns to breathe in short, delicate sips of air. The maid begins to tie the knot. A heavy, secure double bow, tucked deep into the small of the back where the corset curves most dramatically. The symphony of the laces ends with the final snip of the excess cord, or the tucking of the long tails beneath the fabric. The silence returns, but it is a different kind of silence than the one we started with. It is a silence of containment. Eleanor is now a finished structure. She cannot bend at the waist. She cannot slouch. Even her voice will be different now, higher, softer, because the deep diaphragm breath is no longer possible. She turns slowly, her movements limited and graceful, like a clockwork doll. The weight of the corset is now a part of her, a heavy, constant reminder of her place in the world. She looks down at the laces scattered on the floor, thin, white ghosts of her morning freedom. Think about the thousands of women doing this exact same thing at this exact same moment, all across the city, all across the country. A hidden army of women, all bound by silk and bone, all breathing in that same shallow, rhythmic way. They are the silent pillars of the Victorian age, held upright by the very things that restrict them. The fire in the grate has shifted, a log breaking apart with a soft, muffled crackle. A single plume of smoke rises and disappears into the chimney. Eleanor takes a sip of air, cautious, measured. She is ready for the layers that will follow, the petticoats, the crinolines, the heavy velvet. But the foundation is set. The symphony is over. Stay here in the stillness, feeling the ghost of that pressure. Imagine the relief of the evening, still many hours away, when these laces will finally be cut or loosened, and the body will be allowed to expand back into its natural, breathing state. But for now, there is only the tension, the grace, and the long, slow ticking of the clock in the hall. The room is no longer just a bedroom, it has become a stage, and the costume is growing heavier with every passing minute. Eleanor stands in the center of the rug, her breath hitting the invisible wall of her corset in shallow, rhythmic sips. But now, the maid approaches with something even more imposing, something that looks more like an invention of engineering than a piece of clothing. The cage crinoline. Think about the sheer scale of this device. It is a vast, skeletal structure made of concentric circles of flexible steel, held together by vertical bands of heavy cotton tape. As the maid unfolds it, the steel hoops make a soft, metallic clinking sound, like the distant ringing of bells in a fog. Clink, clink, rustle. It is wide, expansive, and it demands its own space in the world. To wear it is to carry a room around yourself, to ensure that no one, and nothing, can come too close to the person inside the cage. Eleanor steps into the center of the hoops. She looks like a bird stepping into a gilded snare. The maid lifts the waistband, pulling the entire structure up until it rests firmly on Eleanor's hips, right over the padding of her petticoats. Feel the shift in weight. It isn't heavy in a crushing way, but it is bulky. It changes the way she perceives the floor beneath her. The hoops sway slightly as she finds her balance, a slow, hypnotic movement that mimics the rocking of a ship on a calm sea. This is the architecture of distance. The crinoline ensures that Eleanor will occupy at least 3 feet of space in every direction. She can no longer stand close to a table, she cannot walk through a narrow door without turning sideways, and she cannot sit in a regular chair without the entire structure tilting upward like a seesaw. It is a physical manifestation of Victorian boundaries. It is the steel boundary between the lady and the common world. Listen to the sound it makes as Eleanor takes her first experimental step. Swoosh, clink, sigh. The fabric of her underpetticoats rubs against the steel ribs, creating a white noise that follows her wherever she goes. Imagine the engineering that went into these steel bands. Before this, women wore layer upon layer of heavy, starched horsehair petticoats to achieve this volume. Sometimes up to 7 or 8 layers, weighing 20 pounds or more. The cage was supposed to be a liberation, a lightweight alternative that allowed the legs to move freely beneath the hoops. But in exchange for lightness, it gave her a constant, swaying instability. The maid begins to smooth out the cotton tapes, ensuring that each hoop hangs perfectly level. If one hoop is crooked, the entire gown will look lopsided, a social disaster in the eyes of the high society critics of Boston. Eleanor looks down at herself. From the waist down, she has disappeared into a geometric mystery. Her legs are hidden, her feet are invisible. She seems to be floating on a sea of white fabric and steel wire. Think about the danger of this beauty. The newspapers are full of stories of the crinoline peril. A sudden gust of wind on a street corner could catch these hoops like a sail, knocking a woman off her feet. Even worse, the fire. In the parlor, where the open hearths crackle with orange flames, the crinoline is a silent trap. A woman might stand too close to the embers, her vast skirts brushing the fire without her even feeling the heat until it is too late. The cage that protects her social standing can, in an instant, become a cage of flame. But Eleanor does not think of the danger now. She thinks of the grace. There is a specific way one must move while wearing the cage. You do not walk, you glide. You must learn to swing the hips in a rhythmic, figure-8 motion to keep the hoops from bouncing. Swing, glide, pause. It is a dance that begins the moment she wakes and only ends when the sun goes down. The maid now brings the first over petticoat, a thick, starched layer of muslin designed to hide the visible ridges of the steel hoops. As it is dropped over the cage, the metallic clinking is muffled. The sound becomes softer, deeper, a dull thud of fabric against metal. Layer by layer, the cage is being transformed into a skirt. The sharp edges of the engineering are being softened by the domesticity of the textile. Eleanor feels the air moving beneath the hoops. It is a strange, drafty sensation. While her torso is encased in the heat and pressure of the corset, her lower body feels curiously exposed, even though she is covered by yards of material. It is a world of contradictions. Constraint above, a vast, hollow emptiness below. She moves toward the vanity, and the hoops bump against the wood with a soft thump. She has to learn the new dimensions of her body. Her reach is longer now, her personal space is sacred. Think of the rooms of 1885. The narrow hallways, the crowded parlors filled with bric-a-brac and porcelain vases. Every movement Eleanor makes is a calculated risk. A turn too sharp could send a Ming vase shattering to the floor. A step too fast could trip the maid. The silence of the morning is now filled with the voice of the dress. It is a symphony of rustles, clicks, and the rhythmic breathing of the woman at its center. Eleanor looks at her hands, resting on the topmost hoop. She feels like the captain of a very small, very elegant ship. She is navigating the domestic waters of her own home, bound by the laws of steel and the expectations of her class. Outside, the sun is now fully above the horizon. The light is stronger, revealing the fine dust motes dancing in the air. They settle on the steel hoops, on the white muslin, on the polished floor. The world is getting louder, but inside this room, time is still moving at the speed of a needle and thread. The maid reaches for the silk gown, the final layer that will hide the cage forever. But for this moment, the cage is visible. A masterpiece of 19th century industrial thought, worn by a woman who is herself a masterpiece of social construction. We stay here, in the swaying rhythm of the hoops. Listen to the silence between the clinks of the steel. Feel the weight of the air inside the hollow skirt. This is the hidden architecture of the Gilded Age. A world built on structures we can no longer see, held together by tapes and wires, and the quiet, unwavering patience of the women who wore them. Eleanor takes a step, and the cage swings, a slow, metallic heartbeat in the quiet of the dawn. The morning is half over, and the lady is almost built. Stay in this space. Let the swaying of the hoops lull you into a deep, rhythmic calm. There is no rush to leave the year 1885. The cage is steady. The room is quiet. And the journey continues, one hoop, one stitch, one breath at a time. The foundation is set, the corset is laced, and the steel cage of the crinoline sways gently around Eleanor's legs. But now comes the crowning weight, the final transformation of the morning. The maid reaches into the depths of the cedar wardrobe and brings forth the gown. It is a masterpiece of dark, shimmering silk, but as it catches the light, you realize it is much more than just fabric. It is a monument of labor, a physical accumulation of time and effort. Think about the sheer density of this garment. It feels heavy even to look at. 10,000 stitches, perhaps 20,000, all hidden within the seams, the ruffles, and the intricate pleats that decorate the hem. As the maid lifts the bodice, you can hear the soft, expensive rustle of the silk taffeta. It is a sound of wealth, but also a sound of immense weight. Each stitch was a second of someone's life, a movement of a needle through fabric, repeated hour after hour, day after day, in a dimly lit sewing room across the city. Eleanor raises her arms once more, and the maid drapes the heavy fabric over the cage. Listen to the sound as the silk meets the muslin-covered hoops. It's a deep, muffled slide, a sound that says the transformation is almost complete. The weight of the skirt settles onto her hips, pressing the crinoline down, grounding her to the floor. She is no longer just a woman. She is a mountain of textile, a walking sculpture of silk and thread. Imagine the hands that made this gown. The seamstresses who sat in cramped rooms, their eyes straining under the flicker of a single candle or a weak gas jet. Every ruffle you see, every tiny silk rose, every inch of lace was handled by fingers that were likely pricked and scarred by the needle. To wear this gown is to wear the labor of the invisible. Eleanor feels the pressure of the fabric on her shoulders, a weight that reminds her that beauty is never light, and grace is never free. The maid begins to fasten the dozens of tiny buttons trailing down the back of the bodice. Flick, tuck, slide. Each button is a small, silk-covered pearl, and each one requires a deliberate movement of the fingers. There is no rushing this process. To rush is to risk tearing the delicate silk, to rush is to disrespect the craftsmanship. So we wait. In the silence of the room, the only sound is the rhythmic, metallic click of the maid's thimble against a stray pin, and the soft, shallow breathing of the woman being encased in her finery. Think about the texture of the silk. It is heavy silk, a grade of fabric that can almost stand on its own. In 1885, quality was measured by substance. The more fabric you wore, the more status you carried. Eleanor is currently wearing nearly 25 yards of material. If you were to stretch this fabric out, it would cover the entire floor of the bedroom, and yet here it is, gathered, pleated, and tucked into a single, elegant form. The weight begins to pull at her neck and shoulders. The corset helps distribute the burden, but there is no escaping the reality of the Gilded Age. To be a lady is to endure. She feels the silk brushing against her wrists, the cool touch of the lace at her throat. The lace itself is a story of its own, handmade in a village in France or perhaps by an immigrant girl in a tenement house. It is delicate, like a spider's web, yet it has the strength to survive decades. Eleanor looks at her reflection. The woman in the mirror is now fully hidden. Her skin is covered from her chin to her toes. She is a fortress of propriety. The stitches hold her together, keeping her thoughts in, and the world's judgments out. Every time she moves, the 10,000 stitches groan in unison, a tiny, microscopic chorus of tension. The silk sighs, the petticoats rustle, and the steel hoops of the cage provide a low, rhythmic bass note to the symphony of her movements. Notice the detail on the sleeves. Tiny, intricate folds of fabric that look like the scales of a mythical creature. Each fold was ironed with a heavy, charcoal-filled box iron, a task of heat and sweat that stands in stark contrast to the cool, calm demeanor Eleanor must now maintain. The gown is a mask. It hides the effort of the maid, the exhaustion of the seamstress, and the physical restriction of the wearer. Inside the gown, Eleanor is a secret. No one will ever see the corset laces, or the steel hoops, or the simple linen chemise. All they will see is the shimmering silk, the perfect fit, the effortless grace. But we know. We know the weight. We know the stitches. The maid finishes the last button at the nape of her neck. The transformation is complete. Eleanor takes a small step, and the weight of the gown follows her, a half-second behind her own movement. It is like moving through water, slow, resistance-filled, and strangely calming. There is a security in this weight. It anchors her to her role, to her house, to her century. Outside, the morning mist has cleared, and the sunlight is now hitting the silk directly. The fabric changes color, moving from a deep navy to a brilliant, electric blue. The 10,000 stitches catch the light in their own way, thousands of tiny shadows and highlights that give the dress its soul. Eleanor reaches for her gloves. The morning ritual is ending, but the day of endurance is just beginning. She will wear this weight through breakfast, through morning calls, through the long, slow hours of the afternoon. She will never slouch, she will never complain, because she is held upright by the invisible labor of a dozen people, and the visible structure of her own social duty. Stay here with the weight. Feel the pull of the silk. Listen to the whisper of the thread. In the quiet of 1885, there is a profound dignity in the effort of getting dressed. It is a slow, beautiful, and exhausting art form. The lady is built. The stitches are set. And the house waits for her to descend the stairs, one heavy, graceful step at a time. The morning light is now a steady, pale amber, filling the room with a soft clarity that reveals every grain of dust dancing in the air. Eleanor stands before the washstand, a heavy, marble-topped piece of furniture that feels like an altar in this early hour. In a world before the constant hum of running water, the morning wash was not a hurried task, but a slow, sensory ritual. It was a moment of connection between the body and the elements, a quiet ceremony that required patience and grace. Notice the weight of the porcelain pitcher. It is large, decorated with hand-painted sprigs of forget-me-nots or perhaps simple, elegant gold bands. The maid has carried this water up 2 flights of stairs, a heavy, sloshing burden that represents the invisible labor of the household. As Eleanor reaches for the handle, the porcelain feels cool and smooth against her skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of the fire that is only now beginning to take hold in the grate. Listen to the sound as the water meets the basin. Glug, splash, ripple. It is a deep, hollow sound echoing in the quiet room like a small waterfall in a stone cavern. The water is not hot, but lukewarm, having lost its initial steam during the journey from the kitchen stove. A thin veil of vapor rises for a moment and then vanishes into the cool morning air. Eleanor watches the surface of the water settle into a perfect, glass-like mirror, reflecting her own tired eyes and the flickering shadow of the gas lamp. She reaches for the soap, a hard, triple-milled bar scented with English lavender or perhaps the faint, medicinal tang of Castile. It sits in its own small, fluted dish, a tiny island of cleanliness. As she rubs the soap between her palms beneath the water, the sound is a soft, muffled sliding. There are no thick, chemical bubbles here, only a fine, creamy lather that feels like silk against her fingers. The scent of lavender begins to fill the space around the washstand, a clean, floral aroma that cuts through the heavy smell of coal smoke and stale night air. Think about the texture of the sponge. A natural sea sponge, harvested from the Mediterranean and dried until it became a porous, honeycomb structure. When it hits the water, it sighs, a soft hiss as it drinks in the liquid, growing heavy and soft in her hand. Eleanor presses the sponge to her face. The water is a shock, a sudden, cold embrace that pulls her heart into her throat for a second, and then releases it into a state of calm alertness. Every drop that travels down her skin is a reminder of her own physical existence, a sensation that exists beneath the layers of silk and steel. The room is silent, save for the rhythmic drip, drop, splash of the water back into the basin. In 1885, water was precious. It was not to be wasted. Every cupful had been earned through effort. This makes the act of washing feel more intentional, more sacred. She moves with a deliberate slowness, cleaning the dust of the night from her neck and wrists, the areas where the lace of her gown will soon rest. Look at the washstand itself. The marble top is cold and white, veined with gray shadows that look like frozen lightning. On it sits the small tools of her grooming, a silver-backed brush, a jar of cold cream, a tray of hairpins. They are silent witnesses to this daily transformation. The water in the basin is no longer clear, it is cloudy with soap and the faint residue of the coal-fired world outside. It has done its job. It has carried away the stillness of sleep and replaced it with the readiness of the day. Eleanor reaches for the towel. It is heavy linen, starched and folded with mathematical precision. The fabric is not soft like modern cotton, it is crisp and slightly abrasive, stimulating the blood beneath the skin as she pats herself dry. Scrub, pat, smooth. The sound of the linen against her skin is a dry, rustling whisper. She feels the glow of cleanliness, an internal warmth that matches the growing light in the room. Think of the thousands of washstands across the city, in attic rooms and grand mansions alike. Thousands of porcelain pitchers being tilted, thousands of basins filling, thousands of women standing in the half-light, performing this same ancient ritual. It is the common thread of the human story, the need to wash away the past and prepare for the future. In this moment, Eleanor is connected to every woman who came before her, and every woman who will follow, all bound by the simple necessity of water and light. The maid approaches to take the basin away, her movements quiet and respectful. The used water will be carried back down the stairs, back to the drains, back to the earth. The ritual is ending. Eleanor stands taller now, her skin cool and refreshed, her mind clear. The washstand remains, a silent, marble altar that will wait for her until tomorrow morning, when the sun returns to find her in the gray light of dawn. Stay in this moment of cleanliness. Feel the phantom touch of the cool water. Listen to the fading echo of the splash. The house is waking up, the fires are being stoked, and the lady is clean, ready to face the world with a face of porcelain and a heart of steady, quiet resolve. The water is gone, but the peace remains. The morning transition is now complete, the stairs have been descended with the heavy, rhythmic swaying of silk and steel, and Eleanor enters the dining room. The air here is different, warmer, filled with the rich, comforting scent of toasted bread, dark coffee, and the faint, sulphurous tang of the coal fire burning in the grate. But it is not just a room for eating. The breakfast table is a landscape of silent communication, a place where every object has a position and every gesture has a meaning. Look at the table itself. It is a sea of white damask linen, starched so heavily that it looks like carved marble. On this white expanse, the silver and porcelain are arranged with mathematical precision. In 1885, a breakfast table was not just a convenience, it was a map of one's social standing. The way the sunlight catches the edge of a silver butter knife, the way the shadow of a crystal jam jar stretches across the cloth, it is all part of a carefully orchestrated visual symphony. Eleanor takes her seat, the crinoline cage beneath her skirt adjusting with a soft, metallic sigh as it meets the chair. She must sit perfectly upright, her spine held straight by the unyielding whalebone of her corset, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the table. Beside her plate sits the silver. Not just one fork and one spoon, but a specialized tool for every possible bite. The heavy, silver-plated fork, the delicate, long-handled spoon for soft-boiled eggs, the small, sharp knife for cold meats. To touch these objects is to speak a language of breeding, a language that requires no words, only the correct placement of the fingers. Listen to the sound of the morning service. Chime, clink, rustle. The maid moves around the table like a ghost, her presence marked only by the soft pouring of coffee into a bone china cup. The sound of the liquid hitting the porcelain is a thin, high-pitched splash, followed by the delicate rattle of the saucer. It is a fragile sound, a reminder that in this world, everything is refined, everything is breakable. The steam rises in thin, lazy curls, disappearing into the high, ornate ceiling. Think about the egg. A simple, white, soft-boiled egg resting in its silver cup. But for Eleanor, this egg is a test of etiquette. One must not simply crack it. One must use the small silver spoon to gently tap the top, a sound like a tiny hammer on a porcelain bell. Tap, tap, crack. The shell is removed piece by piece, silent, deliberate. To make a mess is to fail. To eat too quickly is to show a lack of character. Every mouthful is a sip of discipline. Across the table, her husband reads the newspaper. The heavy, rustling sound of the broadsheet paper is the only conversation they share for long minutes. Flick, rustle, fold. In the Victorian world, silence was not empty. It was full of rules. It was a space where thoughts were kept behind a veil of politeness. Eleanor spreads a thin layer of orange marmalade onto a piece of toast. The silver knife makes a soft, scraping sound against the charred bread, a dry, rhythmic noise that seems loud in the quiet room. The marmalade is a deep, translucent amber, containing tiny slivers of bitter peel from Seville. It represents the vast reaches of the empire, brought across oceans just to rest on this white tablecloth in Boston. As she takes a bite, the crunch of the toast is internal, a sharp, private sound that no one else hears. She tastes the sweetness, the bitterness, and the iron-cold reality of the morning. Notice the light on the silver coffee pot. It is a tall, elegant vessel, its surface polished so brightly that Eleanor can see a distorted reflection of herself. A tiny, silver version of a woman encased in blue silk, trapped in a world of reflections. She reaches for the cream, the heavy silver jug pouring a thick, white ribbon into the dark coffee. Watch as the white and black swirl together, a miniature storm in a teacup, until the liquid becomes a smooth, uniform tan. The sound of the spoon stirring the cup is a delicate, circular ringing. Tink, tink, tink. It is the sound of time being measured out in spoonfuls. Everything on this table tells a story of labor. The sugar in the bowl was refined in a factory of heat and dust. The coffee beans were picked under a tropical sun. The linen was woven in a mill where the looms never stopped. And yet, here, in this quiet dining room, all that struggle is hidden. It is sanitized into a moment of perfect, still beauty. The breakfast table is a mask, just like the corset, just like the silk gown. It hides the effort of the world behind a facade of silver and lace. The fire in the grate pops, a single ember falling and glowing red against the black iron. Eleanor feels the warmth on her face, but her hands remain cool against the silver. She looks at the window. Beyond the heavy drapes, the city is alive. Men are rushing to offices, servants are scrubbing doorsteps, the industrial heart of the 19th century is beating. But here, inside the dining room, the pulse is slower. It is the pulse of the long, slow morning. She puts down her spoon. The ritual is ending. The maid approaches to clear the plates. The clatter of porcelain being stacked is a signal that the next phase of the day is beginning. Eleanor wipes her mouth with a heavy linen napkin, a final, soft touch of fabric against skin. The damask is folded back into its original crease, as if the meal never happened, as if the table is waiting to be reset for a future that looks exactly like the past. Stay in the lingering scent of the coffee. Listen to the fading echo of the silver against the china. The language of the breakfast table has been spoken. The roles have been played. The silence has been maintained. The lady rises, her skirts rustling like a field of dry wheat, and the dining room returns to its still, marble-topped perfection. The day is unfolding, and the world waits outside the heavy, velvet-draped doors. The dining room doors close with a soft, muffled click, and the world of silver and silent etiquette is left behind. Eleanor moves toward the back of the house, her heavy skirts whispering against the polished floorboards, a sound like dry leaves skittering across ice. She enters the morning room. It is her sanctuary, a space that belongs neither to the public world of the parlor nor the functional world of the kitchen. Here, the air is lighter, filled with the soft, golden haze of the mid-morning sun, and the faint, sweet scent of dried roses and beeswax. Think about the light in this room. It is not the harsh, direct glare of the afternoon, but a gentle, diffused glow that filters through thin, muslin curtains. Thousands of tiny dust motes dance in these beams of light, a silent, chaotic ballet that seems to slow down time itself. Eleanor stands in the center of the rug, watching them. In 1885, a room like this was a psychological fortress. It was a place where a woman could untether her mind, even if her body remained bound by the whalebone and steel of her corset. Look at the furniture. It is lighter than the heavy, imposing mahogany of the dining room. Here, we find wicker chairs with plush, velvet cushions, and small, elegant tables with slender, curved legs. Eleanor sits at her writing desk, a delicate piece of rosewood inlay. As she sits, the crinoline cage beneath her silk gown expands, brushing against the legs of the desk with a soft, metallic thrum. It is a reminder that even in her sanctuary, she carries her architecture with her. On the desk sits her stationery, thick, cream-colored paper that feels like fabric between her fingers. Beside it is the inkwell, a heavy, cut glass cube filled with dark, midnight blue ink. In the morning room, time is measured not by a clock, but by the slow, rhythmic scratch of a pen. Eleanor reaches for her ivory-handled letter opener. It is cool to the touch, smooth and ancient. She slides it through the envelope of a letter, the sound a crisp, satisfying zip in the quiet of the room. Listen to the silence. It is not an empty silence. It is a heavy, textured stillness. From the hallway, she can hear the distant, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock, a slow, steady heartbeat that says, "There is no rush." From the garden, the faint, muffled chirp of a sparrow. From downstairs, the occasional, metallic clatter of a coal scuttle. These sounds do not break the peace, they highlight it. They are the background noise of a world that moves at the speed of a horse-drawn carriage. Think about the wallpaper. A complex, sprawling pattern of ivy and lilies, designed by William Morris. In the dim corners of the room, the patterns seem to move, to breathe, to entwine with the shadows. Eleanor traces the curve of a painted leaf with her eyes. To live in a Victorian room was to live inside a forest of ornament. Every surface was covered, every gap was filled. It was a way of pushing back against the vast, industrial emptiness of the outside world. She leans back, or at least, as far back as her corset will allow. Her breath is a soft, rhythmic sigh. In this room, she can be a spectator of her own life. She looks at her hands, resting on the green baize of the desk. They are pale, still, almost like porcelain. In 1885, a woman's hands were a ledger of her status. The lack of calluses, the softness of the skin, these were the marks of a life spent in sanctuaries like this. There is a small fire in the grate, not for heat, but for the sake of the light. The logs are small, birch or applewood, and they burn with a clear, blue-white flame. Pop. Crackle. Hiss. A single spark jumps onto the hearth, glows for a moment, and then turns into a tiny, gray ghost of ash. Eleanor watches the fire, her mind drifting through the long, slow sentences of a half-remembered poem. On a small table beside her sits a vase of peonies. Their petals are heavy, overripe, some of them already beginning to fall. One petal drops, landing on the polished wood with a sound so soft it is almost imagined. A dry, velvety thud. In the morning room, you notice these things. You notice the way the light shifts from the rug to the wall. You notice the way the scent of the tea changes as it cools. You notice the weight of your own existence. Eleanor reaches for a book, a small, leather-bound volume of Tennyson. The leather is old and soft, smelling of tannins and dust. As she opens it, the spine gives a soft, rhythmic groan. The pages are thick and yellowed at the edges, decollaged and rough. She does not read for information. She reads for the rhythm of the words, for the way they match the slow, steady pulse of the house. Think about the air in this room. It is still. It is a trapped piece of the 19th century. It has been warmed by the sun and scented by the history of the house. To breathe this air is to breathe in the patience of 1,000 mornings. Eleanor closes her eyes for a moment. Behind her lids, she still sees the pattern of the wallpaper, the dance of the dust motes, the flicker of the blue-white flame. She is at the center of a series of circles. The circle of her chemise, the circle of her corset, the circle of her crinoline, the circle of this room, the circle of this house. Each layer is a protection. Each layer is a boundary. But here, in a sanctuary, the boundaries feel soft. They feel like an embrace rather than a cage. The maid will not return for another hour. The world will not demand a social performance until the afternoon. For now, there is only the sun, the ink, and the slow, heavy swaying of the silk gown as Eleanor shifts her weight. Rustle, sigh, tick. The symphony of the morning room continues. Stay here in the golden haze. Let the pattern of the ivy lull you. Listen to the breath of the house. There is no world beyond these muslin curtains. There is no time beyond the scratch of the pen. We are safe in the year 1885. We are still. We are home. The sun has moved further across the room, its rays now illuminating the surface of the rosewood desk with a sharp, clinical clarity. Eleanor dips her pen into the inkwell. It is a heavy, square-cut crystal, and the ink inside is a deep, shimmering midnight blue. In 1885, a letter was not just a message. It was a physical piece of one's soul, a tactile extension of the self that would travel across miles, carried by hand, horse, and steam. Before she writes a single word, we must listen to the silence of the preparation. Think about the weight of the pen. It is a slender, tapered handle of polished ebony, tipped with a fine, steel nib. As she dips it into the ink, there is a tiny, microscopic clink of metal against glass. She draws it out, watching the single, dark drop of ink cling to the nib, a trembling globule of potential thought. She waits. If the ink is too heavy, it will blot. If it is too thin, the words will fade like a ghost. There is a perfect, silent tension in this moment of waiting. Look at the paper. This is not the thin, bleached pulp of the modern world. This is heavy, cream-colored vellum, made from cotton rags. It has a texture you can feel with your eyes, a soft, slightly porous landscape that waits for the wet kiss of the ink. Eleanor places her hand on the page. Her skin looks pale against the cream, her fingers still, disciplined by the years of training. In the Victorian world, your handwriting was your portrait. Every loop, every flourish, every slant told a story of your education, your character, and your place in the social hierarchy. Now, the first stroke. Scratch. Listen to that sound. It is the most honest sound of the 19th century. The sharp, rhythmic friction of steel nib against cotton fiber. Scratch, swirl, pause. Eleanor begins with the date. January 14th, 1885. As the wet ink hits the paper, it looks black and swollen, standing out in relief against the page. Slowly, as the fibers drink the liquid, it settles, turning into that signature midnight blue that will last for 100 years. Think about the physical effort of this act. Eleanor is encased in her corset, her ribs held tight, her breath shallow. To write a long letter is a feat of endurance. She cannot lean over the desk, she must sit perfectly upright, her arm moving from the shoulder, her eyes focused on the nib. Every word is a deliberate choice. There is no delete key here. There is no backspace. If she makes a mistake, she must either live with the blemish or start the entire page again. This creates a slowness of thought, a meditative quality that our world has forgotten. The room remains still. The only competition for the sound of the pen is the steady, rhythmic ticking of the clock on the mantel. Tick, scratch, tick, scratch. They are the two heartbeats of the morning room. Eleanor is writing to a cousin in London. She thinks about the journey this paper will take. From this desk, into a leather satchel, across the Atlantic on a great, iron-hulled steamship, through the fog of the Thames, and finally, weeks from now, into another quiet room just like this one. The letter is a bridge through time and space. Notice the scent. The ink has a faint, metallic smell, mixed with the sweet, dusty aroma of the paper and the lingering lavender on Eleanor's wrists. As she reaches the end of the first page, she does not turn it over immediately. The ink is still wet, a glistening, dark river of thought. She reaches for the sand caster, a small, silver shaker filled with fine, gray sand. She sprinkles the sand over the writing. It looks like tiny diamonds scattered across the words, drinking up the excess moisture. Then, she tilts the paper, and the sand rolls off with a soft, rushing sound, like a miniature tide retreating from a beach. Now, the page is dry. It is safe to touch. She turns it over, the paper giving a stiff, rhythmic snap as it bends. She begins the second page. Her thoughts are deeper now, more intimate. She speaks of the winter light, the weight of the new silk gown, the quiet of the house. In 1885, letters were the only place for the inner world to exist. Behind the silver breakfast service and the steel crinolines, this was where a woman could breathe. Not with her lungs, but with her pen. The fire in the grate has settled into a bed of glowing orange coals. A single, blue flame licks the air and disappears. Eleanor pauses, her pen hovering over the word longing. She watches the shadow of her hand on the desk. It is a long, elegant shadow, moving only when she moves. She realizes that she is recording a moment that will never happen again. This light, this ink, this specific feeling of the corset against her ribs. It is all being captured in the 10,000 stitches of her handwriting. Finally, the closing. Yours, with deepest affection. She signs her name with a flourish, a sweeping, confident curve of the pen that marks the end of the ritual. But the act is not finished. Now, the folding. She folds the paper with mathematical precision, the edges meeting perfectly. Crease, press, slide. The sound of the paper being folded is a dry, crisp snap. Then, the wax. She reaches for a stick of red sealing wax. She holds it over a small, flickering candle on the desk. Watch the wax soften. It begins to glow, a deep, ruby red, becoming liquid and heavy. A single drop falls onto the envelope. Drip. It looks like a bright, bloody eye on the cream-colored paper. While it is still hot and molten, Eleanor takes her brass signet seal, engraved with her family crest, and presses it into the wax. Listen to the silence of the seal. Press, hold, release. The wax hardens instantly, capturing the intricate detail of the crest in a permanent, brittle embrace. The letter is now a secret. It is sealed. It is a physical object that cannot be opened without breaking the heart of the wax. Eleanor leans back. Her task is done. Her arm is tired, her eyes are heavy from the focus, but her heart is lighter. She has spoken. She has sent a piece of herself out into the world. She places the pen back on its rest, the metal giving a final, soft clink against the glass. The morning room is now full of the white, brilliant light of noon. The sanctuary is changing. The afternoon demands are approaching. But for a moment, stay here with the smell of the wax and the blue of the ink. Think of the weight of the words. Think of the slowness of the 19th century. The letter is waiting on the desk, a quiet, cream-colored promise of connection in a world that moved at the speed of the heart. Stay in the stillness. Listen to the fading echo of the pen. The ink is dry, the seal is cold, and the story continues. The letter is sealed, the red wax has hardened into a cold, brittle stone, and Eleanor rises from her writing desk. Her skirts move with her, the silk rustling like the wings of 1,000 moths trapped in a darkened room. She moves toward the corner of the sanctuary, where the shadows are deeper, and the air feels older. Here stands the curio cabinet. It is a tall, imposing structure of carved ebony and glass, a miniature museum that holds the fragments of a world she is only allowed to see through a pane of crystal. Think about the glass of this cabinet. It is old glass, hand-blown and slightly rippled, like the surface of a pond just before it freezes. As Eleanor approaches, her reflection ghost walks across the glass, a shimmering image of blue silk and pale skin blending with the treasures inside. She reaches for the small, silver key that hangs from a silk ribbon on her waist. Listen to the sound of the key entering the lock. A tiny, precise click. Then, the slow, heavy groan of the cabinet door as it swings open. Creak, sigh. The scent that escapes is ancient. It is the smell of dried rose petals, camphor, old velvet, and the faint, metallic tang of Victorian science. This cabinet is the inner world of the household, a collection of secrets brought back from the far corners of the empire. Eleanor reaches out, her fingers hovering over a shelf lined with green felt, soft as moss in a shaded forest. Look at the first object. A dried butterfly from the Amazon, its wings a brilliant, electric blue that seems to glow even in the shadows. It is pinned to a piece of cork, a tiny, macabre masterpiece of nature. In 1885, to own such a thing was to own a piece of the wild, tamed and silent behind glass. Eleanor does not touch the wings. She knows they would crumble into a fine, iridescent dust at the slightest breath. She simply watches the way the light catches the scales, a blue so deep it feels like looking into the heart of the ocean. Next to the butterfly sits a nautilus shell. It is heavy, cold, and polished until it shines like a pearl. Eleanor lifts it, the weight of the sea settling into her palm. Think about the geometry of this shell. A perfect, mathematical spiral that grew in the dark, rhythmic depths of the Pacific. She holds it to her ear, or at least, as close as her elaborate hair and the stiff collar of her gown will allow. Whoosh, hum, sigh. It isn't the ocean she hears, but the echo of the room's own silence, trapped and magnified by the porcelain-like walls of the shell. She places it back with a soft, muffled thud on the velvet shelf. Her eyes move to a small, glass dome. Beneath it, a miniature forest of white coral, looking like the bleached bones of a tiny, underwater city. It is delicate, fragile, and impossibly complex. To the Victorians, these objects were curiosities, but to Eleanor, they are windows. Encased in her corset, bound by the walls of her house, these objects represent the freedom she will never truly know. The butterfly flew, the nautilus swam, the coral grew in a world without lace or steel. Listen to the stillness inside the cabinet. It is a different kind of quiet than the rest of the room. It is the quiet of things that have stopped moving. On the lower shelf, there is a collection of porcelain doll heads, their faces pale and unblinking. They look back at her with glass eyes that have seen decades of mornings just like this one. They are the perfect Victorian ladies, silent, beautiful, and unchanging. Eleanor traces the curve of a porcelain cheek with her fingernail. Click, slide. The sound is sharp and hollow. Beside the dolls lies a fossil, a dark, heavy stone containing the imprint of a fern that lived millions of years ago. In 1885, the idea of deep time was beginning to haunt the Victorian mind. To hold this stone is to feel the weight of eternity. Eleanor feels the ridges of the fossilized leaf, a ghost of a plant that breathed an air long gone. It makes her own life, her own struggles with silk and etiquette, feel like a single, flickering spark in a vast, dark cavern. There is a small, silver box at the back of the shelf. Eleanor opens it, the hinges giving a tiny, high-pitched screech. Inside is a lock of hair, braided into an intricate, circular knot. It is a memento mori, a piece of a loved one who has passed beyond the veil. The hair is still soft, still carrying the faint, ghost scent of rosewater. In this cabinet, life and death sit side by side, organized, labeled, and kept in their place. Think about the dust in the cabinet. Even here, in this sealed sanctuary, a few microscopic motes have found their way inside. They settle on the butterfly, on the shell, on the porcelain faces. Dust is the slow, rhythmic clock of the universe. It is the only thing that moves in this frozen world. Eleanor takes a soft, silk cloth and begins to wipe the glass of the domes. Swish, swish, rustle. The sound of the silk against the glass is a dry, rhythmic whisper. She looks at her own reflection again in the polished ebony wood. She is part of the collection now. The blue silk of her gown matches the butterfly. The stillness of her posture matches the porcelain dolls. The rigidity of her form matches the fossilized stone. She is a curio in her own home, a masterpiece of social engineering kept in a grand, velvet-lined box of a house. The sun is hitting the cabinet now, turning the glass domes into spheres of white fire. The butterfly's wings shimmer, the coral glows, the silver box sparkles. It is a moment of intense, silent beauty. But it is a beauty that requires a cage. Without the glass, the butterfly would rot. Without the cabinet, the shells would be lost. Without the house, Eleanor would have no place in the world. She slowly closes the cabinet door. The sound is a final, heavy thump as the wood meets wood. She turns the key. Click. The secrets are locked away once more. The silence of the sanctuary returns to its natural, heavy state. The curio cabinet stands in the shadows, a silent, ebony sentinel guarding the fragments of a wider world. Stay here in the fading light of the corner. Feel the weight of the glass and the stone. Listen to the echo of the key in the lock. In the year 1885, we are collectors of moments, keepers of silence, and dwellers in the shadows of our own history. The cabinet is closed, but the dream of the blue butterfly remains, fluttering in the quiet spaces of the mind. The secrets of the curio cabinet are once again behind lock and key, and the stillness of the morning room begins to feel like a heavy, silent weight. Eleanor feels the need for air, or at least, as much air as the world outside the velvet drapes can offer. She moves toward the garden doors, the heavy, metallic swaying of her crinoline cage marking each step across the floor. Rustle, thud, sway. It is time for the promenade, the daily ritual of walking through a nature that has been as carefully corseted and disciplined as the woman herself. Think about the transition from the house to the garden. As she opens the tall, glass doors, the scent of the morning hits her, a cool, crisp mixture of damp earth, evergreen needles, and the faint, distant smoke of the city's chimneys. It is a breath of life, yet it is cold. Eleanor steps out onto the stone terrace, the sun, now high and brilliant, glinting off the polished silk of her electric blue gown. In the year 1885, to step into the garden was not to escape society, but to perform within a different, greener stage. Listen to the sound of her first step onto the gravel path. Crunch, crunch, crunch. It is a sharp, rhythmic sound, an honest, physical noise that cuts through the muffled silence of the house. Every pebble under her leather boots is a tiny, shifting piece of the world, resisting her weight. Eleanor does not rush. She cannot. Her movements are dictated by the steel hoops beneath her skirt, which sway in a long, slow, hypnotic arc with every stride. To walk in a crinoline is to move like a swan on a still lake, effortless on the surface, but supported by a hidden, constant effort beneath. Look at the path ahead. It is a masterpiece of Victorian order. The hedges are trimmed into perfect, geometric walls of dark, glossy green. Not a single leaf is out of place. The flower beds are organized by color and height, a botanical army standing at attention. In this garden, nature has been taught to obey. The roses are tied to their trellises with soft, green twine, forced to grow upward, forced to be beautiful in a way that suits the eye of the observer. Eleanor traces the line of the hedge with her gaze. She feels a strange, silent kinship with these plants. They, too, are held in place by invisible laces and steel wires. Think about the air around her. It moves the silk of her ribbons, a soft, playful fluttering against her neck. But beneath the silk, the corset remains. Her breath is still that same, shallow, upper chest sip of air, even here, in the open. The garden offers a sense of space, but the cage remains around her ribs. It is a psychological promenade as much as a physical one. She walks past the sundial, a heavy, lichen-covered stone that marks the passage of time with a silent, creeping shadow. In 1885, time felt like this shadow, slow, inevitable, and deeply tied to the movement of the heavens. Notice the sounds of the garden waking up. The distant, muffled chirp of a robin, hidden somewhere in the ivy. The soft, rushing sound of the wind through the tops of the elm trees, like the sound of a distant ocean. Whoosh, sigh, rustle. And through it all, the constant, rhythmic crunch of the gravel. It is the heartbeat of her walk. Eleanor reaches a stone bench, its surface gray and cold, decorated with carved griffins that stare unblinkingly at the boxwood. She does not sit. Sitting in a crinoline is a complex, technical maneuver that she is not yet ready to perform. She prefers to stand, to be a part of the vertical order of the landscape. There is a small fountain in the center of the garden, a bronze boy holding a leaking shell. Listen to the water. Drip, ripple, splash. It is a thin, silver sound, repeating itself in an endless, circular loop. The water falls into a stone basin covered in soft, green moss, as thick and plush as the velvet cushions in the morning room. Eleanor watches a single, golden leaf float on the surface of the water. It moves slowly, caught in a tiny, microscopic current, until it hits the edge of the basin and stops. In this garden, even the drifting of a leaf feels like a significant event. Think about the silence of the promenade. There are no voices here. No demands. No etiquette to speak, only the etiquette of movement. She is a silent, blue figure in a green world. The shadow of her vast skirt stretches out across the grass, a long, dark, bell-shaped ghost that follows her every move. She looks at the house from this distance. The tall, narrow windows reflect the sky, looking like cold, blue eyes watching her. The house is the master, and the garden is the playground, but both are governed by the same, unyielding rules of propriety. Eleanor reaches the edge of the property, where a wrought iron fence separates her world from the street beyond. She pauses. Through the black, twisted metal, she can see the dust of the road, the distant, muffled rattle of a delivery wagon, the flash of a stranger's hat. It is a world of movement, of noise, of soot and sweat. But here, inside the fence, the air is still. The gravel is clean. The silence is protected. She feels the coldness of the iron through her gloves, a hard, unyielding boundary. She turns back toward the house. The promenade is half over. Her legs are tired from the weight of the silk and the swaying of the steel, but she does not show it. Her face remains a mask of porcelain calm. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound of her return is the same as the sound of her departure. In the Victorian world, progress was often a circle, a rhythmic return to where you began. Notice the scent of the damp earth again. It is stronger now as the sun warms the ground. It is a primitive, ancient smell that reminds her that beneath the gravel, beneath the foundations of the house, the earth is wild and untamed. For a fleeting second, she imagines what it would be like to walk on the grass without shoes, to breathe without the corset, to run without the cage. But the thought is as fragile as a butterfly's wing, and it vanishes the moment she sees the maid waiting by the terrace doors. The promenade is ending. The ritual of the garden is complete. Eleanor steps off the gravel and back onto the silent, cold stone of the terrace. The air of the house waits for her, heavy, scented with beeswax, and full of the slow ticking of clocks. She takes one last look at the green walls of the hedges, the silver drip of the fountain, and the long, creeping shadow of the sundial. Stay here in the fading echo of the gravel. Feel the cool, garden breeze one last time before the doors close. In the year 1885, we are observers of order, walkers of paths, and keepers of the boundary between the wild and the refined. The garden remains, silent and trimmed, waiting for the next morning, the next promenade, and the next rhythmic, swaying step of the woman in the velvet cage. The promenade through the garden has ended, the gravel's crunch is replaced by the muffled, velvet silence of the drawing room. The grandfather clock in the hallway strikes 4, its deep, resonant chime echoing like a heartbeat through the house. Dong, 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 dong. It is the hour of tea. In 1885, afternoon tea was not merely a refreshment, it was a ceremony of the shadows, a slow, liquid mystery that brought together the fragments of the day. Eleanor sits in her high-backed chair, her silk skirts settling around her like a vast, shimmering lake, while the afternoon sun begins its slow, golden retreat behind the heavy drapes. Think about the sound of the tea service arriving. It begins in the distance, a soft, metallic rattle of a silver tray, the rhythmic, heavy footsteps of the footman, and the subtle, high-pitched clink of porcelain. The door opens, and the tray is placed on the low table with a solid, satisfying thud on the mahogany. Eleanor watches the steam rise from the silver teapot, a thin, white ghost that curls and dances in the fading light, disappearing into the ornate patterns of the ceiling. Look at the porcelain. It is bone china, so thin that it is almost translucent, like the skin of a winter grape. If you were to hold a cup against the light, you could see the shadow of your own fingers through the walls of the clay. The pattern is intricate, gold filigree and tiny, hand-painted violets, each one a testament to the thousands of hours spent by workers in the potteries of Staffordshire. Eleanor reaches for the handle, her fingers moving with a practiced, elegant slowness. There is a specific weight to a Victorian teacup, a fragility that demands your entire attention. Listen to the sound of the pour. Splosh, ripple, hiss. The tea flows from the long, curved spout of the teapot, a dark, amber ribbon that fills the cup with a deep, herbal aroma. The scent of Darjeeling fills the air, mixed with the sweet, buttery smell of scones and the sharp, clean tang of lemon slices. In this room, at this hour, the tea is the only thing that moves. Eleanor adds a single, white sugar cube. Plop. A tiny splash, followed by the delicate, rhythmic ringing of the silver spoon against the porcelain side. Tink, tink, tink. It is the smallest sound in the world, yet in this silence, it feels as significant as a bell in a cathedral. Think about the tea mystery itself. Why do we gather in the half-light of the afternoon? Behind the polite smiles and the soft rustle of silk, tea was the space for whispers. It was a time when secrets were stirred into the cups along with the cream. Information was traded in the clink of a saucer. A look, a pause, a way of holding a napkin, these were the silent signals of a social game that Eleanor had been playing since she was a girl. She watches the steam settle into droplets on the silver spoon, tiny, shimmering spheres of water that reflect the entire room in miniature. Notice the weight of the silver tea strainer. It is heavy, cold, and engraved with the family crest. As she lifts it, the tea leaves trapped inside look like dark, wet earth, a fragment of a plantation in a distant, tropical land, now resting in a quiet parlor in Boston. Eleanor feels the warmth of the cup through her lace gloves, a comforting, radiant heat that travels up her arms and softens the rigid tension of her corseted frame. For a few minutes, the boundaries of her world seem to melt into the amber liquid. Think about the silence of the room. The fire in the grate is dying down, the coals glowing with a deep, ruby intensity. A single ember pops, sending a shower of orange sparks against the brass fender. Pop. Crackle. Hush. Outside, the world is turning to gray, but inside, the tea service keeps the night at bay. Eleanor takes a sip. The tea is hot, astringent, and grounding. It is the taste of 1885. A mixture of colonial trade, domestic ritual, and the slow, patient passage of time. Look at the shadows on the wall. As the sun sinks lower, the shadows of the tea service grow long and distorted. The teapot looks like a crouching beast, the cups like small, white stones in a darkened field. Eleanor traces the line of the shadow with her eyes. She realizes that she, too, is part of this silhouette, a dark, bell-shaped form against the wallpaper, a ghost in her own house. The afternoon tea is a transition, a bridge between the activity of the morning and the formality of the evening dinner. It is the liminal hour, where the rules of the day begin to blur into the dreams of the night. Listen to the sound of the clock again. Tick, tick, tick. It seems slower now, as if the tea has thickened the very air of the room. Every movement Eleanor makes, the lifting of the cup, the placing of a scone on a plate, the dabbing of a napkin, is a slow-motion dance. There is no rush to finish. The pot is large, the tea is plenty, and the silence is deep. In the Victorian world, to waste time was a sin, but to spend time in tea was a virtue. The tea mystery lies in the things that are not said. The letters that were not written, the feelings that were tucked away like the laces of a corset, the dreams that were hidden behind the porcelain calm. Eleanor looks at the empty chair across from her. The ghost of a conversation lingers there, a memory of her mother, or perhaps a friend who has moved away. She stirs the dregs of her cup, the silver spoon making a soft, swirling sound in the liquid. The tea leaves at the bottom form strange, chaotic patterns, a map of a future that no one can truly read. Notice the texture of the scone. It is crumbly, warm, and tastes of flour and salt. She breaks it with her fingers, the sound a dry, rhythmic crunch. She applies a thick layer of clotted cream, white as the winter snow, and a dollop of strawberry jam, red as the sealing wax on her morning letters. It is a small, sensory indulgence in a day otherwise defined by restriction. The maid returns to check the hot water, her movements a silent, dark blur in the shadows of the corner. Eleanor nods, a minimal gesture that says everything and nothing. The fresh water hits the teapot, hissing as it wakes up the sleeping leaves for a second brew. The ritual continues. The light is almost gone now, replaced by the flickering orange glow of the fire. The drawing room has become a cavern of silk and shadows. Stay here in the warmth of the cup. Feel the weight of the porcelain in your palm. Listen to the fading echo of the silver spoon. In the year 1885, we are drinkers of tea, keepers of secrets, and watchers of the fading light. The tea mystery is never truly solved, it is only lived, cup by cup, shadow by shadow, in the long, slow, quiet afternoon of a century that is slowly slipping away. The tray will soon be taken away, the porcelain will be washed in the dark kitchen, and the evening will demand a new costume, a new role. But for now, there is only the amber glow, the lavender scent, and the rhythmic, steady breathing of the house. Sleep is coming, but the tea must be finished first. The tea has grown cold in the bottom of the porcelain cup, the amber liquid now still as a frozen pond. Eleanor rises from her chair, her crinoline cage swaying with a heavy, metallic rhythm as she moves toward the tall, narrow windows of the drawing room. She pulls back the heavy velvet drapes, just an inch, just enough to peer out at the world beyond the sanctuary of her walls. Outside, the golden hour of the afternoon is being swallowed, not just by the approaching night, but by something darker, something heavier. The shadow of the industrial smoke. Look toward the horizon, where the elegant spires of the churches meet the sky. In the distance, the great chimneys of the factories stand like black, unblinking sentinels against the bruised purple of the clouds. They are the lungs of the 19th century, exhaling thick, rhythmic plumes of soot and coal smoke that drift over the city like a slow-moving funeral shroud. In 1885, this smoke was the smell of progress, but for Eleanor, it is a silent, persistent reminder of the world that supports her silk-lined life. Think about the texture of that air. It is not the clean, garden breeze of the promenade. It is heavy, gritty, and tastes of sulfur and iron. Even here, behind the thick glass of her windows, she can see the fine, gray dust that has settled on the outer ledge, a microscopic layer of the industrial heartland trying to find its way inside. Every breath she takes in this house is filtered through layers of lace and velvet, but the smoke remains, a dark, constant presence on the edge of her vision. Listen to the sounds of the city beyond the glass. It is a muffled, chaotic symphony. The distant, rhythmic thud of a steam hammer, the high-pitched whistle of a locomotive pulling into the station, the continuous, low rumble of iron-rimmed wheels on cobblestones. It is a world of heat, friction, and relentless movement. Contrast this with the stillness of Eleanor's room. Inside, there is the soft ticking of a clock, the crackle of a dying fire, and the whisper of silk. Outside, there is the roar of the furnace, the scream of the whistle, and the heavy, rhythmic beat of the machine. This is the hidden contract of the Gilded Age. The lace at Eleanor's throat was woven in a mill where the air was thick with cotton dust. The steel in her crinoline was forged in a furnace that burned hotter than the sun. The coal in her hearth was dug from the deep, dark veins of the earth by men who never saw the daylight. She is a creature of the light, but she is tethered to the shadow. Every stitch in her gown is a link in a chain that leads back to the factory floor, to the rhythmic, deafening clatter of the looms. Eleanor traces a finger along the cool glass of the window pane. She watches a single, black soot flake drift down from the sky, landing on the window like a dark, burnt snowflake. It is a fragment of the charcoal-burning world, a tiny, silent messenger from the labor that never stops. In the Victorian mind, there was a great wall between the domestic and the industrial, but the smoke does not recognize walls. It seeps through the cracks, it stains the white marble of the stoops, and it lingers in the threads of the heavy velvet drapes. Think about the thousands of people moving within that smoke. While Eleanor prepares for the evening ritual of dinner, a whole world is finishing its shift. Workers with soot-stained faces are emerging from the iron gates, their footsteps a heavy, rhythmic trudge through the gray slush of the streets. They are the shadow version of her life. Their silence is not the silence of the parlor, but the silence of exhaustion. Eleanor feels a strange, unnameable heaviness in her chest, a pressure that is not caused by her corset, but by the sheer weight of the world outside her window. The sun is almost gone now, a deep, bloody red line on the horizon, partially obscured by the thick, rolling fog of the coal fires. The city lights are beginning to flicker on, small, amber dots of gaslight struggling against the encroaching gloom. The smoke turns the atmosphere into something thick and tactile, a velvet darkness that smells of winter and industry. It is a hauntingly beautiful sight, in its own terrifying way. A world of fire and iron, wrapped in a blanket of gray. Notice the way the light catches the smoke. It turns the plumes into towers of bronze and gold, shifting and swaying in the cold wind. It is a symphony of movement, a slow-motion dance of the industrial age. Eleanor watches as the smoke from her own chimney rises to meet the great cloud over the city, a small, white contribution to the collective darkness. Even her sanctuary is part of the system. Even her peace is fueled by the same fire that powers the mills. She lets the curtain fall back into place, the heavy fabric cutting off the view of the chimneys. The room returns to its artificial, golden calm. But the image of the industrial shadow remains in her mind. She moves back toward the center of the room, the swaying of her skirts a soft, rhythmic echo of the machines she just imagined. She is safe, for now, within the velvet cage. But the smoke is still there, waiting at the door, circling the house, a silent, dark reminder that the 19th century is a world of both silk and soot. Listen to the house again. The fires are being stoked for the night. The coal scuttle rattles in the hallway, a metallic, rhythmic sound that connects the basement to the parlor. The industrial heart is beating right here, in the pipes and the hearths of the mansion. There is no escape from the shadow, only the grace with which one carries it. Stay here in the half-light. Feel the weight of the city outside. Listen to the distant, muffled roar of the Iron Age. In the year 1885, we are dwellers in the light, but we are children of the smoke. The chimneys continue to exhale, the machines continue to turn, and the lady prepares for the night, while the industrial shadow grows long and deep over the world. The night is coming, and with it, the gaslight will transform the smoke into a dream, a shimmering, dark mystery that will haunt the sleep of the Gilded Age. Take one last breath of the lavender-scented air, and remember the iron, the coal, and the 10,000 stitches that hold the shadow at bay. Listen to the house again. The transition to twilight brings a new set of sounds. The settling of the floorboards as the temperature changes, a slow, rhythmic creak, groan. The sigh of the wind in the chimney, a low, hollow moan that sounds like a distant voice. The clock on the mantelpiece seems to grow louder in the amber light, it's ticking a sharp, insistent reminder that the Gilded Age is moving, second by second, toward its inevitable end. Tick, tick, tick. Eleanor moves to the mantel, her heavy skirts swaying with a rhythmic, metallic shush. She looks at the small, silver-framed photograph of her mother. In the gaslight, the image looks alive, the shadows on the face shifting with the movement of the flame. She feels the continuity of the night. Her mother stood here in this same twilight, watched the same lamplighter, felt the same tightening of the corset as the sun went down. It is a lineage of light and shadow, a chain of women held together by the same quiet rituals. Think about the silence of the twilight. It is a heavy, expectant silence. The world is waiting for the dinner bell, for the arrival of guests, for the next chapter of the night. But for now, in this liminal space, there is only the flicker of the jet and the humming of the gas. Eleanor takes a shallow, measured breath, her ribs expanding against the bone and steel. She is a part of the twilight, a creature of the half-light, balanced between the sun and the stars. The lamplighter is gone, the room is lit, and the twilight has finally surrendered to the dark. The transformation is complete. The sanctuary of the house is sealed, the velvet drapes are closed, and the world is reduced to this golden, flickering circle of warmth. We stay here for a moment, in the hum of the gas and the pulse of the flame. The night is deep, the history is long, and the lady is waiting. Stay in the stillness. Let the amber light wash over you. Listen to the heartbeat of the gaslight. In the year 1885, we are watchers of the evening, keepers of the flame, and dwellers in the beautiful, flickering shadows of the past. The twilight is over, but the light remains, a steady, rhythmic promise in the heart of the Victorian night. The gas lamps have been lit, and the heavy velvet drapes have successfully shut out the industrial fog of the city. The parlor is now a theater of golden hues, a sanctuary of warmth where the shadows are deep and the air smells of polished mahogany and dried lavender. Eleanor moves toward the grand piano, a massive, black, lacquered instrument that stands in the corner like a silent king. In 1885, before the invention of the radio or the phonograph, music was not something you simply heard, it was something you physically created. It was the heartbeat of the evening, the only force capable of breaking the rigid silence of Victorian etiquette. Think about the physical presence of the piano. Its ivory keys are cool to the touch, smooth and unyielding, waiting for the warmth of human fingers to wake them from their slumber. Eleanor sits on the small, velvet-topped stool, her crinoline cage expanding and settling with a soft, metallic sigh against the legs of the instrument. She must maintain her posture, her spine held straight by the whalebone corset, her shoulders back, her chin slightly raised. Even the act of playing music is a performance of discipline. Listen to the first sound. She lifts the lid over the keys, the heavy wood giving a soft, rhythmic groan as it is raised. Then, the first note. Plink. It is a high, clear, lonely sound that shatters the stillness of the room. Eleanor begins to play a slow nocturne, perhaps something by Chopin, a melody that feels like it was written for the blue light of the evening. The vibrations of the strings travel through the wood, into the floor, and up through the soles of her boots. The music is not just in the air, it is in her bones. Think about the complexity of the movement. Her hands move across the keys with a delicate, floating grace, while beneath her heavy skirts, her feet find the brass pedals. The movement of the pedals is a muffled, rhythmic thud, thud, thud against the carpet. It is the mechanical undercurrent to the ethereal melody. As she presses the sustain pedal, the notes blur together, creating a wash of sound that fills the parlor, drowning out the ticking of the clock and the crackling of the fire. In the Victorian parlor, music served a hidden purpose. It was a bridge between the things that could be said and the things that had to remain secret. Beneath the layers of silk and the steel cage of her skirt, Eleanor feels a surge of emotion that has no place in a polite conversation. She pours it into the keys. The crescendo is a storm, a dark, crashing wave of sound that shakes the crystal droplets on the chandelier. For these few minutes, the velvet cage is not a prison, but a resonance chamber. The music is the only thing in her life that is allowed to be loud, allowed to be messy, allowed to be free. Look at the shadows on the wall. As her hands move, her shadow dances across the wallpaper, a long, distorted ghost of a woman trapped in a bell-shaped gown. The flickering gaslight makes the shadow leap and dive, a silent, rhythmic mimicry of her internal struggle. The room feels smaller now, crowded with the weight of the notes. The parlor is no longer a room, it is a landscape of sound. Every chord is a hill, every pause is a valley. Listen to the silence between the notes. It is a living silence, thick with anticipation. Eleanor closes her eyes, letting her fingers find the path. She thinks about the strings inside the piano, thousands of feet of steel wire, held under immense tension. Just like the wires in her crinoline, just like the laces in her corset. The whole world of 1885 seems to be held together by tension, by things pulled tight, by structures that are one step away from snapping. But in the music, that tension is beautiful. It is the source of the harmony. The fire in the grate has shifted, a log breaking apart and sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Eleanor does not notice. She is lost in the final movement of the piece. The melody is growing softer now, retreating into the lower octaves. The notes are deep, resonant, and slow. They sound like the ticking of a much larger clock, the clock of the century itself. She plays the final chord, a rich, complex harmony that seems to hang in the air for an eternity. Fa-odd, silence. She keeps her hands on the keys for a moment, feeling the last vibrations die away into the ivory. The silence that follows is deeper than the one we started with. It is a heavy, velvet silence that feels like a physical weight. The music has done its job. It has cleansed the room. It has given a voice to the shadows. Think about the listeners. Somewhere in the house, the maid has stopped her work to listen. Her husband, in the library, has looked up from his book. For a few minutes, they were all connected by the same vibration, the same ghost of a melody. In a world of rigid social boundaries, music was the only thing that could travel through walls, through floors, and through the invisible barriers of class. Eleanor slowly lowers the lid of the piano. Clack. The sound is final, a period at the end of a long, melodic sentence. She rises, her skirts rustling like a field of wheat in a storm. The evening is progressing. The performance of the parlor is over, and the deeper, more private rituals of the night are approaching. Stay here in the fading echo of the nocturne. Feel the stillness of the air. Listen to the ghost of the notes that still haunt the corners of the room. In the year 1885, we are creators of sound, keepers of harmony, and dwellers in the echoes of our own hearts. The piano stands silent now, its black surface reflecting the flickering gaslight, waiting for the next morning, the next evening, and the next soul to wake its strings. The house breathes with the music. The night is still. And the journey continues, deeper into the shadows, deeper into the soul of the Gilded Age. The music of the parlor has faded into the heavy velvet of the drapes, the last vibration of the piano strings has vanished, and Eleanor moves now into the most silent room of the house. The library. As she pushes open the double oak doors, they give a slow, deep, rhythmic groan, a sound that feels like it belongs to another century. This is not just a room for books, it is a room that breathes. It is a sanctuary of concentrated thought, where the air is thick with a scent that is both comforting and ancient. The library's leather breath. Think about that scent. It is a complex, layered aroma. It begins with the smell of old, vegetable-tanned leather, the bindings of 1,000 books that have stood on these shelves for decades. It is the scent of tannins, of beeswax, and the faint, dusty sweetness of decomposing paper. Mixed into this is the sharp, metallic tang of the cold iron fireplace tools, and the deep, earthy smell of the dark mahogany paneling that covers every wall from floor to ceiling. In 1885, this was the smell of authority, the scent of a world that believed all the answers could be found between two leather covers. Eleanor steps inside, her heavy blue silk gown rustling with a sharp, rhythmic hiss against the Persian rug. The rug is thick, woven with intricate patterns of deep crimson and midnight blue, muffling the sound of her footsteps until she is moving like a ghost through a forest of paper. She does not light the central chandelier. Instead, she takes a small, silver taper and lights a single green-shaded reading lamp on the central desk. Scritch, flick, hum. The gas jet comes to life, casting a pool of soft, emerald light across the leather-topped desk, leaving the rest of the room in a deep, velvet darkness. Look at the walls. Thousands of spines, lined up like silent, leather-clad soldiers. Some are bound in calfskin, smooth and cool to the touch. Others are in Morocco leather, with a pebbled, rhythmic texture that catches the dim light. The gold leaf lettering on the spines glints as Eleanor moves past, names of poets, philosophers, and explorers long since turned to dust, yet still breathing through their words. In the library, time does not move in a straight line. It circles. It lingers. It waits. Listen to the silence of the shelves. It is a packed silence. It is the sound of 10 million words resting side by side, a silent, rhythmic vibration of history. Every book carries the breath of the person who last read it. Eleanor reaches for a volume on the middle shelf, a heavy, cloth-bound history of the ancient world. As she pulls it out, the sound is a soft, sliding shh against its neighbors. A tiny, microscopic cloud of dust rises, dancing in the emerald light of the lamp before settling back onto the shelf. Think about the weight of the book in her hands. It is solid. It has substance. She carries it to the large, wingback chair by the cold hearth. As she sits, her crinoline cage collapses with a slow, rhythmic, metallic sigh, folding in on itself to fit the narrow space between the arms of the chair. She is held upright by her corset, her ribs pressed against the bone, her eyes focused on the page. She opens the book, and the sound of the spine cracking is a sharp, rhythmic snap in the stillness. The paper is thick, deckle-edged, and yellowed like old ivory. Eleanor runs her finger along the edge of the page, the texture rough and uneven. Slide, scuff. She turns the page, and the sound is like a dry leaf falling on a stone floor. Flit, sigh. In the library, every sound is magnified. The ticking of her small pocket watch, the rhythmic, shallow sound of her own breathing, the distant, muffled groan of the house as it settles into the night. Look at the desk. It is covered in a green, gold-tooled leather that has been worn smooth by years of leaning elbows and sliding pens. There is a heavy, brass inkwell, the ink inside a dark, stagnant pool. Beside it, a magnifying glass with a handle of carved bone, and a pile of handwritten notes, the ink faded to a ghostly brown. This room is a graveyard of intentions. For every book read, there are 10 that are forgotten. For every thought recorded, 1,000 have vanished into the leather-scented air. Eleanor looks up from her book, her gaze wandering to the shadows at the top of the room. The ladder, a tall, rolling structure of oak and brass, stands in the corner. She imagines climbing it, rising above the gaslight, into the cold, dark air near the ceiling where the rarest books are kept. Up there, the air is even thicker, the leather breath even stronger. It is a world of vertical knowledge, a ladder to the heavens of the 19th century. Think about the stillness of her body. In the library, Eleanor is more than just a woman, she is a statue. The blue silk of her gown is dark and still, the only movement is the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of her shoulders with each breath. The library demands this stillness. It is a room of the mind, and the body must be disciplined to allow the mind to wander. She feels the pressure of the velvet cage, the corset and the cage working together to keep her perfectly centered, perfectly still, perfectly Victorian. Listen to the clock in the hall. Its chime is different here. It sounds more distant, more hollow, as if the books are absorbing the sound, eating the seconds before they can reach her. Dong, dong, dong. The night is deepening. The industrial smoke outside has been replaced by the black, starless sky, but here, the leather breath remains constant. It does not care about the time. It does not care about the city. It only cares about the preservation of the word. Notice the light on her hands. They look like marble in the green glow of the lamp. She traces the gold-stamped pattern on the book's cover, a series of interlocking circles that remind her of the hoops in her skirt. Everything is connected. The architecture of the book, the architecture of the house, the architecture of her own body. They are all structures designed to contain, to protect, and to define. Eleanor closes the book. The sound is a heavy, muffled thump that echoes through the room. She stays in the chair for a moment, breathing in the leather one last time. It is a scent that makes her feel both small and significant. Small in the face of so much history, but significant because she is the one who is here, in the year 1885. Keeping the silence. She rises, her skirts rustling with a slow, rhythmic shush as the crinoline expands back to its full, bell-shaped glory. She turns off the gas jet, and the emerald light vanishes, replaced by the deep, charcoal shadows of the night. The library returns to its darkness. The books settle back into their silent, rhythmic sleep. Stay here in the dark for a moment. Feel the heavy, leather-scented air. Listen to the ghost of the words. In the year 1885, we are readers of the past, dwellers in the silence, and keepers of the leather breath. The doors are closing, the night is cold, but the knowledge remains, waiting in the dark, shelf by shelf, page by page, breath by breath. The grand staircase has been ascended, and the heavy oak door of the bedchamber has closed with a final, soft, rhythmic thud. The house is asleep, the servants are in their quarters, and the gaslight has been turned down to a low, flickering amber glow. Eleanor stands in the center of the room, her heavy blue silk gown shimmering like a dark, restless sea in the shadows. It is time for the most intimate, the most exhausting, and yet the most liberating ritual of the day. The unlacing. In the year 1885, to be a lady was to be a prisoner of architecture, and the night was the only time the prisoner was allowed to go free. Think about the weight of the day that still clings to her body. The 10,000 stitches, the steel hoops, the whalebone ribs, they have all become a part of her skin. The maid moves behind her, her movements a quiet, rhythmic rustle of white cotton. There is no conversation now, only the shared understanding of the ritual. First, the gown. Listen to the sound of the dozens of tiny, silk-covered buttons being undone. Flick, pop, slide. Each one is a small, rhythmic release of tension. The bodice is loosened, and as it slips from her shoulders, Eleanor feels the sudden, cool kiss of the night air on her skin. It is a sharp, refreshing shock. The gown is lifted away, a heavy, rustling mountain of silk that is laid carefully across the velvet chaise. Now, the crinoline. The maid reaches for the ties at the waist. Listen to the sound as the weight of the steel cage is finally released. Swoosh, thud. The hoops collapse onto the floor in a wide, white circle, looking like the skeleton of a fallen star. Eleanor steps out of the cage, her legs feeling strangely light, almost buoyant, as if she is walking on air for the first time since dawn. But the true ritual, the core of the mystery, still remains. The corset. Eleanor grips the bedpost, her knuckles white, her body braced. She looks at her reflection in the dark, silvered mirror. She sees a figure wrapped in white coutil and lace, a torso disciplined into an impossible, unyielding curve. The maid takes a firm hold of the long, silk laces at the back. This is the moment of the reverse symphony. Think about the tension in those cords. They have been pulled tight for 16 hours, holding her ribs, guiding her spine, dictating her breath. Listen to the sound of the first pull. Creak, snap, hiss. The knot is undone. As the laces begin to slide through the metal eyelets, the sound is a long, rhythmic, sliding whisper. Shh, shh, shh. With every inch of lace that is loosened, the world seems to expand. Eleanor feels the sudden, terrifying, and wonderful rush of blood back into her skin. The pressure on her lungs begins to lift. Imagine the sensation. It is like a heavy hand slowly, deliberately, opening its grip on her heart. She takes her first, true, deep breath. It is a shaky, rhythmic gasp. The air travels deep into her diaphragm, filling spaces that have been dormant since the sun rose. Her ribs expand with a soft, audible groan of the fabric. Expansion, relief, pulse. The maid continues to pull the laces, working from the top to the bottom, rhythmically, patiently. The corset is no longer a structure, it is becoming a shroud. It is losing its power. The architecture of the lady is being dismantled, piece by piece, bone by bone. Look at the marks on the white linen of her chemise. Small, circular indentations from the eyelets, red lines where the whalebone pressed against the skin. They are the maps of her endurance. In 1885, beauty was a slow, persistent ache. Eleanor touches her side, the skin feeling tender and warm. The blood is humming now, a deep, rhythmic throb that matches the ticking of the clock on the mantel. She feels the sudden weight of her own body, the softness of her own flesh, returning to her from the grip of the steel. The final busk at the front is unclipped. Click, click, click. The corset falls away, a stiff, white shell that the maid carries to the wardrobe. It looks like a piece of abandoned armor, cold and hollow in the shadows. Eleanor is left in only her thin, white linen chemise. She feels small. She feels fragile. She feels human. She moves to the window, her movements no longer swaying or rigid, but soft, fluid, and natural. Think about the silence of this moment. The voice of the dress is gone. There is no rustle of silk, no clink of steel, no hiss of laces. There is only the sound of the night wind against the glass, and the rhythmic, deep, steady sound of a woman breathing. She breathes for the seamstress who made the gown. She breathes for the maid who pulled the laces. She breathes for herself, for the quiet, hidden soul that exists beneath the layers. The maid approaches with a brush of boar's hair and silver. Eleanor sits at her vanity, her long, dark hair being released from its dozens of pins. Listen to the sound of the pins hitting the porcelain tray. Ping, clink, tinkle. Each one is a tiny, rhythmic release of the mind. As the brush travels from the scalp to the ends, the sound is a soft, rhythmic shush, shush, shush. 100 strokes. 100 moments of quiet, rhythmic meditation. The hair falls over her shoulders like a dark, silken curtain, hiding the marks of the day. Notice the light on the vanity. The single candle is burning low, its flame a long, thin, amber needle in the dark. The reflection in the mirror is different now. The icon of the Gilded Age is gone. In her place is a woman of flesh and blood, with tired eyes and a heart that beats with a slow, rhythmic, steady resolve. The night has claimed her. The ritual is complete. Eleanor moves toward the bed, the heavy, white linen sheets looking like a cool, silent snowdrift in the shadows. As she climbs in, the mattress gives a slow, rhythmic creak of welcome. She pulls the heavy, goose-down quilt up to her chin. The weight is different now. It is the weight of comfort, not of constraint. It is the weight of sleep. Think about the air in the room. It is cool, scented with the fading lavender and the cold, metallic ghost of the corset. But the breath of the house is calm. The unlacing is more than just removing clothes, it is the removing of the century itself. In the dark, beneath the quilt, Eleanor is no longer in 1885. She is in the timeless, rhythmic space of rest. Stay here in the deep, velvet darkness. Feel the slow, steady expansion of your own lungs. Listen to the heartbeat of the house. The laces are loose, the cage is empty, and the night is long. In the year 1885, we are travelers of the dream, keepers of the breath, and dwellers in the deep, quiet relief of the night. The candle flickers one last time and goes out. The symphony is over. The lady is at rest. Sleep, rhythmic and deep, is the only architecture that remains. The unlacing ritual is a memory now, the corset lies cold on the chair, and the room has surrendered to the deep, velvety embrace of the midnight hour. But before the eyes can finally close, before the mind can drift into the starless void of sleep, there is one final, sensory comfort to attend to: the hearth and the warming pan. In the year 1885, warmth was not a constant, it was a gift, a flickering, fragile thing that had to be tended and coaxed through the long, frozen hours of the night. Look at the fireplace at the foot of the bed. The great, roaring flames of the evening have settled into a low, rhythmic glow. The logs have turned into a landscape of shifting, orange canyons, covered in a fine, silver-gray lace of ash. Listen to the sound of the dying fire. Pop. Crackle. Hiss. Every few minutes, a single ember breaks apart, falling into the bed of coals with a soft, muffled thud. This is the heartbeat of the winter room, a slow, thermal pulse that radiates a deep, dry heat, touching the skin like a warm hand in the darkness. Eleanor watches the shadows dance on the ceiling, long, rhythmic shapes that move in time with the flickering embers. She feels the cool air of the room on her face, a sharp contrast to the warmth beneath the heavy quilts. But the true secret of her comfort lies deeper, beneath the layers of linen and wool. Earlier, before Eleanor entered the room, the maid performed a quiet, rhythmic ceremony with the warming pan. Think about that object. A long, slender handle of polished fruitwood ending in a heavy, circular brass pan with a hinged lid. Inside that pan, the maid placed a handful of glowing coals from the kitchen range, coals that carried the heat of the house's central hearth. Imagine the sound of the brass pan sliding between the cold sheets. SSSSSSHHH. Slide, SSSSSSHHH. It is the sound of winter being pushed back. The maid moved the pan in slow, rhythmic circles, ironing out the chill, warming the space where Eleanor's feet would rest. As Eleanor stretches her legs beneath the quilt, she finds that pocket of stored heat. It is a concentrated, radiating warmth that feels almost liquid. It soaks into her ankles, up through her calves, loosening the muscles that have been tensed by the weight of the silk and the steel all day. In 1885, this was the ultimate luxury. To be warm in a world of ice, to be still in a world of motion. The heat of the warming pan is a ghost of the fire, a lingering promise that the cold will not reach her tonight. Notice the scent of the hearth. It is a deep, smoky aroma, the smell of oak and birch and the faint, sulphurous tang of the coal. It is an ancient scent, one that has guarded humanity for thousands of years. It mingles with the smell of the warmed linen, a clean, dry fragrance that speaks of domestic safety. Eleanor breathes it in, a slow, rhythmic expansion of her lungs, feeling the air cool in her throat and warm in her chest. The leather breath of the library and the lavender breath of the morning are gone, replaced now by the fire breath of the night. Listen to the silence outside the circle of the fire's glow. The frost is creeping across the window panes, growing in delicate, rhythmic fractals of ice. You can almost hear the cold, a high-pitched, crystalline tension in the air. But inside, the heavy velvet curtains and the thick stone walls of the mansion hold the silence at bay. The only sound is the rhythmic tick, tick, tick of the small clock on the bedside table, and the soft, internal sound of the fire's settling. Think about the metal of the hearth tools. The brass fender, the iron tongs, the silver coal scuttle. They catch the low light of the embers, glowing with a dull, rhythmic intensity. They are the guardians of the flame, the tools that ensure the house stays alive while its inhabitants sleep. Eleanor looks at the tongs, their long, dark shadows reaching across the rug like the legs of a giant insect. Everything in the room is a silhouette now, a part of the great, flickering mystery of the night. The coals are turning black now, the orange light fading into a deep, dark red. This is the ember's light, the most relaxing light in the world. It does not demand that you see, it only asks that you feel. Eleanor feels the weight of the down quilt, the softness of the feather pillow, and the lingering, rhythmic warmth of the warming pan. Her body is finally sinking, drifting, uncoupling from the reality of the 19th century. Imagine the house itself. A great, silent ship of stone and wood, floating in the dark sea of the city. In every bedroom, a hearth is dying. In every bed, a warming pan has left its ghost of heat. Thousands of people are breathing in this same, rhythmic way, tucked beneath their quilts, safe for a few hours from the demands of the industrial world. The smoke from the chimneys rises into the cold, starless sky, a silent, rhythmic offering to the night. Eleanor's eyes are heavy now, the lids closing with a slow, rhythmic finality. Behind her eyes, she still sees the glow of the coals. She feels the pulse of the house, the heartbeat of the fire, and the slow, steady rhythm of her own spirit. The velvet cage is gone. The symphony of laces is silent. The industrial shadow is far away. There is only the heat, the hearth, and the dark. Stay in this warmth. Let the sound of the settling embers be your guide. Feel the weight of the history around you, but do not let it carry you away. Just rest. In the year 1885, we are sleepers of the flame, keepers of the coal, and dwellers in the deep, rhythmic comfort of the hearth. The last ember pops, a tiny, final sound in the darkness. The orange canyon in the fireplace collapses into a soft mound of gray ash. The room is still. The warmth is secure. And the journey of the day has reached its end. Sleep now, while the warming pan keeps its promise. Sleep, while the hearth guards the room. The night is yours, and the morning is a long, long way away. Eleanor has finally drifted into the soft, shoreless sea of sleep. The warmth of the warming pan has become a faint, lingering ghost beneath the quilts, and the fire in the grate has surrendered its last orange glow to the gray silence of ash. But the house is not truly silent. Beyond the heavy oak door of the bedchamber, in the long, velvet-shadowed corridor, there is a sound. A steady, rhythmic, unwavering pulse that has not stopped since the day the house was built. The ticking of the hallway clock. Think about the physical presence of this machine. It is a grandfather clock, a towering sentinel of carved walnut and polished brass, standing nearly 8 feet tall in the darkness of the landing. In the year 1885, time was not a digital flash on a screen. It was a physical, mechanical process. It was something that had weight, something that required a pendulum to swing and weights to fall. To listen to this clock in the dead of night is to listen to the very machinery of the universe, measured out in small, rhythmic, wooden bites. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Notice the acoustics of the midnight hallway. Without the rustle of silk gowns, without the muffled footsteps of servants or the clatter of tea trays, the house becomes a giant resonance chamber. The sound of the clock travels through the floorboards, vibrating up through the legs of the chairs, echoing off the glass of the framed portraits, and settling into the very bones of the building. It is a slow, hypnotic heartbeat. Each tick is a second of the Gilded Age vanishing into the shadows. Each talk is the arrival of a future that Eleanor will never see. Look at the face of the clock through the gloom. It is a pale, silver disc, etched with elegant Roman numerals that seem to float in the darkness. The hands are thin, black iron lances, moving with a microscopic, rhythmic stutter that is invisible to the eye but audible to the soul. Behind the glass door of the case, the great brass pendulum swings in a long, slow, shimmering arc. Swing, pause, swing, pause. It is the rhythm of a cradle, the rhythm of the tides, the rhythm of a long, Victorian life. Think about the energy inside this clock. High up in the dark interior of the case, heavy lead weights hang from thick, braided cords. They are pulling toward the center of the earth with a constant, rhythmic gravity. Every tick is the release of a single tooth on a brass gear, a tiny, controlled fall of the weight. This is the tension of the house. Just as Eleanor was held in the tension of her corset, just as the city is held in the tension of its industrial smoke, the house is held in the tension of the falling weights. The sound of the clock is a comfort, yet it is also a mystery. It reminds the sleeper that the world is still there, that the laws of physics are still operating, that the sun will eventually return. But it also speaks of the liminal space of the night. In the hallway, the shadows of the banisters stretch out like long, thin fingers, moving almost imperceptibly as the gaslight in the distance flickers and dies. The clock is the only thing that remains awake, a tireless, rhythmic observer of the family's history. Listen to the secondary sounds within the clock itself. Beneath the main tick-tock, there is a microscopic symphony of friction. The soft, rhythmic whirring of the gears, the dry, metallic click of the escapement, the faint, ghostly sigh of the pendulum cutting through the air. It is a living machine, a creature of brass and wood that breathes time instead of air. In 1885, a clock like this was the pride of the home, a symbol of order in a world that was often chaotic. It was the conductor of the domestic orchestra. Think about the silence between the ticks. That tiny fraction of a second where everything stops. In that gap, the house is truly still. The frost on the window stops growing, the coal in the grate stops cooling, and the heart of the sleeper holds its breath. And then, the talk arrives, and the world moves forward once more. It is a rhythmic, constant reassurance that time is a river, not a stagnant pond. Eleanor, deep in her dreams, hears this sound as a distant drumbeat. It enters her sleep, turning into the rhythmic sound of a horse's hoofs on a country road, or the slow, steady splashing of oars in a lake. The clock is the tether that keeps her soul from drifting too far into the darkness. It is the anchor of the night. As the hour approaches, the clock prepares for its great performance. Listen to the shift in the rhythm. Whir, click, clunk. The internal levers are moving, the striking train is engaging. A deep, metallic tension fills the hallway. And then, the chime. Bong. The sound is immense. It is a deep, resonant, bronze vibration that fills the entire house. It travels through the air like a physical wave, shaking the dust motes on the curtains and making the silver in the dining room sing in sympathy. It is the voice of the house, calling out to the night, announcing that another hour of the 19th century has been successfully navigated. Bong. 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 The sound fades slowly, a long, rhythmic decay that lingers in the air for minutes. Fa-odd, hum, silence. And then, the simple, humble tick-tock returns, sounding smaller now, more intimate, as if the clock is settling back into its long, rhythmic vigil. Think of the generations of women who have heard this same clock. The mothers, the daughters, the maids, all lying in the dark, listening to the same walnut-cased heartbeat. The fashion of the crinoline will pass, the industrial smoke will change, the gaslight will be replaced by the white glare of electricity, but the clock will remain. Its rhythm is the rhythm of the building itself, a constant, steady, leather and brass pulse. Look at the hallway one last time. The shadows have settled. The air is cold and still. The only movement is that shimmering, brass pendulum, swinging back and forth, in a long, rhythmic dance with gravity. The clock is the keeper of the house's secrets, the silent witness to the unlacing, the tea, the music, and the dreams. Stay in this rhythm. Let the tick-tock become your own heartbeat. Feel the slow, steady fall of the weights. In the year 1885, We are travelers in time, sleepers in the hallway of history, and dwellers in the rhythmic, mechanical peace of the night. The hour is late, the night is deep, and the clock continues its long, slow, patient count. 1 second. 1 breath. 1 heartbeat. Sleep while the pendulum swings. Sleep while the gears turn. The hallway is quiet, the house is safe, and time is moving exactly as it should. The hallway clock continues its tireless vigil, the tick-tock fading into a rhythmic, distant pulse that Eleanor no longer hears with her ears, but feels within the deepest architecture of her mind. She is no longer in the bedchamber. She is no longer held by the memory of the corset or the weight of the 10,000 stitches. The blue silk has dissolved into a mist, and the steel cage of the crinoline has melted away like morning frost. Eleanor is dreaming. And in this dream, there is only the vast, open, rhythmic expanse of a free horizon. In the year 1885, for a woman of her station, the only true freedom was found in the hours between midnight and dawn. Think about the landscape of this dream. It is not a city of soot and stone. It is a world of endless grass, a sea of green and gold that stretches out toward a sky so wide it feels like a physical embrace. Imagine the sound of the wind here. It is not the sigh of the chimney or the whistle of a locomotive. It is a deep, rhythmic, rushing sound, like the breath of the earth itself. Whoosh, sigh, whoosh. It carries no scent of coal smoke or beeswax, only the clean, sharp smell of wild salt spray and crushed clover. In this dream, Eleanor is running. Notice the sensation of her movement. There is no resistance. There is no whalebone pressing against her ribs, no heavy layers of petticoats dragging against her ankles. Her breath comes in deep, rhythmic, powerful waves, filling her lungs to their very base. Every stride is a long, weightless arc. Her feet barely touching the earth before she is airborne again. Thump, glide, thump, glide. This is the body she was meant to have, a body of motion, a body of speed, a body that belongs to the horizon rather than the parlor. Image, a silhouette of a woman in simple, flowing white linen running through a vast, sun-drenched field toward the ocean. Look at the light in this dream world. It is not the flickering amber of the gaslight or the cold green of the library lamp. It is a brilliant, eternal twilight, a silver-blue glow that makes the world look as though it were made of liquid pearl. The horizon is a line of pure, rhythmic gold, the place where the earth meets the stars. To Eleanor, this line is a promise. It represents everything that the 19th century cannot contain, the unspoken thoughts, the unwritten letters, the lives she might have lived if she were not a creature of the cage. Think about the silence of the dream. It is not the packed silence of the library or the social silence of the breakfast table. It is a free silence. A silence where she does not have to listen for the maid's footsteps or the husband's rustling newspaper. It is a silence that belongs only to her. In this space, the ticking of the clock has turned into the rhythmic sound of her own heart, a steady, confident, unhurried beat. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. It is the drum of a woman who is finally, for a few hours, the master of her own time. She reaches the edge of the world, where the grass gives way to a beach of white, rhythmic sand. The ocean lies before her, a vast, dark, shimmering mystery. Listen to the sound of the waves. Crash, hiss, retreat. Crash, hiss, retreat. This is the oldest rhythm in the universe, a sound that was here before the first stitch was sewn and will be here long after the house has turned to dust. Eleanor stands at the water's edge, the foam curling around her bare feet, cold and electric and real. In the dream, she is not afraid of the cold. She is the cold. She is the water. She is the wind. Think about the structure of her life from this perspective. From the horizon, the mansion looks like a dollhouse, a tiny, fragile box of rules and velvet. The 10,000 stitches are nothing more than spider webs. The steel hoops are just toys. The industrial smoke is a passing cloud. Everything that felt heavy during the day is now light as a feather. Eleanor laughs, a sound that is lost in the rhythmic roar of the surf, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. But even in the dream, the rhythm of the house persists. Far away, in the back of her mind, she can still feel the ghost of the corset, a faint, rhythmic pressure that reminds her of the world she must return to. The dream is a borrowed space, a sanctuary of the soul that exists only while the body is still. She watches the golden line of the horizon, seeing the first, microscopic hint of a new color, a pale, watery gray. The dawn is coming. Notice the transition as the dream begins to dissolve. The salt spray turns back into the scent of her lavender pillow. The rhythmic roar of the ocean fades into the steady ticking of the hallway clock. The wide, open sky shrinks down into the ceiling of her bedchamber, with its ornate plaster moldings and its fading shadows. Eleanor does not fight the change. She accepts it with a slow, rhythmic, steady calm. She carries the horizon back with her, tucked away in the quietest corner of her heart. The first light of the morning is now touching the window panes, a thin, gray thread that picks out the edges of the furniture. The house is waking up. Downstairs, the first fire of the day is being lit. The first kettle is being filled. The first laces of the day are being prepared. But for now, in this final moment of rest, Eleanor is still. She takes one last, deep, rhythmic breath of the dream air. Her lungs feel vast. Her spirit feels wide. She is a woman of 1885, bound by silk and tradition, but she is also the woman of the horizon, free and fast and wild. The velvet cage is waiting, but she knows now that the key is kept in the night. Stay in this fading dream. Feel the ghost of the salt spray on your skin. Listen to the rhythmic, retreating sound of the waves. In the year 1885, we are dreamers of the distance, keepers of the inner world, and walkers of the free horizon. The sun is rising, the world is waking, but the dream remains, a silent, rhythmic promise in the heart of the lady. The house breathes in. The day begins. But the horizon, the golden, endless horizon, is never truly gone. Sleep until the light finds you. Sleep until the laces tighten. For now, you are free. You are home. You are eternal.